I used to walk around with an intermittent vague feeling that I had done something wrong, even though I hadn't. And that was one symptom of decades spent as a people-pleasing nice guy, and I'm happy to say I don't experience that anymore. I've had some viewers say they'd like to know more about what my nice guy journey has looked like on the other side, after I identified the problem and turned it around. So I made this video to give you more details. Once I learned that I needed to respect myself and stop putting others above myself, over many months I experienced some changes I'd like to share with you. I noticed that I was much more at peace, I didn't experience shame like I used to, and I stopped feeling like everything was my fault or responsibility to fix or manage. It was a huge emotional burden lifted that I didn't realize I'd been carrying for years because I thought it was normal. And as I was describing, I used to get these, what I would call intermittent shame attacks. These were not panic attacks. It was just this very unsettled, guilty feeling that's hard to put into words, but I used to experience it often. I could be doing anything or nothing and suddenly just get this insecure, guilty feeling. It was very strange. I never told anyone about it. I didn't know what to make of it. At the time, I had no idea why this was happening, but after I stopped the nice guy behavior and felt better about myself, it stopped. Now I'm happy to report it's been years since I've felt it. The other thing I thought was normal and didn't realize I was experiencing was this mental overhead that I was always carrying from this unrealistic expectation I had put on myself that I keep everyone else happy and fulfilled, make sure there was no conflict, and of course, be sure to do nothing that might upset others. If I tried hard enough, I thought, then life would be smooth and problem-free. Of course, that's not how life works. It's also a major boundary issue because one person cannot literally make another person happy, fulfilled, or emotionally well. We can support others in their struggles, but we're still not responsible for their emotions. The worst part, I'm a psychiatrist. You'd think I'd know better, right? But intelligence and information isn't enough without self-awareness. Like all of us, we're always better at spotting things in others than ourselves, and I could spot these patterns in others while drowning in them myself. Learning this painful life lesson, though, has not only helped me directly, but it's helped me be more understanding and helpful with others who struggle with issues like this. When you are young and you unknowingly sign up for a life as a people-pleasing nice guy, you carry this mental overhead I'm describing, and it really makes life a lot harder and more painful than it needs to be. It's like if your car had an invisible but very heavy trailer attached to the back of it that served no purpose. Your car wouldn't accelerate or handle very well. You'd burn far more fuel than normal. But if your car had always driven like that, you'd probably just think that's how it was. You would think that was normal for your car. You wouldn't realize you had the power to disconnect the hitch and drive away with a significantly improved driving experience. And by the way, if you're getting value from this video so far, I'd appreciate your support by liking the video or sharing it with someone else who needs to hear the message. Thank you. So in my situation, when I became aware of how I had been taking on burdens and responsibilities that were not mine to carry, I stopped doing that. Previously, I had always been very hyper aware of anyone close to me who seemed upset, angry, sad, withdrawn, whatever. And one thing that made this easier is that I was no longer in my marriage where I had avoided conflict. So I was sort of starting fresh in a lot of ways. So now, when someone close to me is struggling in some way, I still care. That hasn't changed. I'm still the same guy at heart. But instead of thinking it's my problem to fix, I just ask myself, how can I realistically be supportive? And this means that I often ask that person the same question. Many of us men are fixers, and we really put a lot of pressure on ourselves to find solutions to other people's problems. But sometimes people just want to be heard or know that you're there for them. As I've approached this issue from the standpoint of just being supportive and not fixing, I feel so much less stress. I still want people to get along with each other as well, of course, but I can't literally make that happen and make my corner of the world a peaceful, problem-free place all the time just because I want it to be like that. I don't have control over all of the things. Similarly, although I'd be lying if I said I didn't care at all what those closest to me think of me, I've made peace with the fact that being honest and true to myself may sometimes mean disappointing others. I'm okay with that. Interestingly, I think people actually respect me more now than they did before. I know my kids do, and most importantly, I respect myself. I used to be pretty harsh on myself. I'd go David Goggins on myself, if you know what I mean. And I still expect a lot and have high standards for myself. I always have, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I can do it without the abusive self-talk. My romantic life changed for the better when I met my now wife. I took many months off dating to work on myself, but when I started dating again, I showed up very differently. I was okay being alone if that's the way it was going to go, and I wasn't being needy or looking for approval. And I've gone into more of all of that in other videos. In our relationship, we don't fight, but we can openly disagree without any hurt feelings. I speak up regarding my needs, preferences, and opinions, and she does too. We treat each other with respect. We've both been through enough at this point in life that we know not to sweat the small stuff, so there's no pettiness either. In day-to-day life, I handle conflict much better, and that doesn't mean I like conflict or actively go looking for it, but I speak up when I need to. I'm not afraid to do that. I don't tolerate disrespect from people or apologize when I've done nothing wrong. I don't apologize for existing. I communicate collaboratively with my wife like an adult, but I don't ask permission to do things grown men shouldn't need permission to do. I also don't over-explain myself to people anymore. I used to do that quite a bit. One thing I think it's important to talk about is how the changes I went through are really easy to watch a video about, but hard to do in real life. And the reality is many men will never turn this around. And while I realize there are many who know their nice guy patterns are making them miserable and still never change, I do think how miserable you are is an important factor in whether you're willing to make the needed changes. It's more likely if you're more miserable in general. I was so miserable, I couldn't stand my life as it was or myself as I was. And becoming 50 and going through a divorce and then awakening to this problem like, oh my gosh, all these years, this has been what I've been doing, gave me a sense of urgency that I had to change things or life was going to continue to be hell. And in life, we often know what we want, but not what we need. And as painful as it can be to become so miserable that you can't stand your life, it can be a gift if it finally gives you the kick in the ass you need to change. I'm also aware that some people out there have been brutally wounded by life and they get cynical, and I understand why. I sometimes hear things like, you know what happens when you start improving yourself and speaking up? You end up alone. End of story. Now, I don't personally share that belief, but I do get where it comes from. And the truth is, some relationships don't survive these changes. And I know it's easy for me to say, well, maybe that's for the better. But I'm not living your life. That's a judgment call you have to make. Still, I see a lot of men stuck in situations that are clearly draining or unhealthy, but they stay because any other opinion seems uncertain and risky. And that cynicism, it starts as protection, but eventually it becomes a cage. It keeps pain out, but it also keeps peace out and any possibility of a healthy connection. I realize our situations are all different, but the people-pleasing nice guy patterns are remarkably similar. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. There's usually no friction-free win-win path out of these situations. And when you factor in the typical nice guy guilt about inconveniencing or upsetting anyone, many guys conclude that the risk isn't worth it. And I understand that thinking, and I was stuck in that place for years, but I disagree. If I hadn't changed anything, I guarantee you I'd still be miserable, probably not understanding why, and I likely would have had years taken off my life from the chronic stress. The change wasn't easy, but here's what I realized. I'd been paying a price for decades in hollow relationships, chronic stress, and lost self-respect. The change had costs. Yes, it did. But staying the same was costing me everything that mattered. Some relationships didn't survive, but I did. And for the first time in decades, I respect the man I become. And if this helped you, or if you're working through some of these same patterns, be sure to leave a comment. And if you're a guy in midlife trying to live with more clarity, boundaries, and self-respect, I'd love to have you stick around. Subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good day.